How good was Les Boyd? That question split the room when NRL legends were asked about him. Darryl Brohman remembered his shattered jaw from 1983. Greg Alexander remembered Boyd trying to gouge his eyes. Yet in the middle stood the enforcer whose 2024 Hall of Fame induction forced Rugby League to ask, can you be a legend and a villain at the same time? The sport is still arguing about it today. Some say his skill was undeniable. Others say his violence was unforgivable. But when you hit the hype feature below, you'll see how these legendary voices break down one of sport's greatest paradoxes. In August 2024, the National Rugby League made an announcement that nobody could stop talking about anywhere. Les Boyd was going into the Hall of Fame. The committee based their decision on ability, achievements, and impact on the game. Boyd's statistics were strong. 17 tests for Australia, state of origin representation, premierships in England. But there was a problem. His disciplinary record was historically brutal. The decision to honor him meant the Hall of Fame chose peak performance over clean play. That choice sent shockwaves through the entire rugby league community. The reaction was immediate and polarized. It exploded across social media, radio shows, and sports bars everywhere. 2GB radio became a battleground. Fox Sports turned it into a cultural war. Commentators forced people to pick a side. Was Boyd a victim of modern softness, or was he a villain whose crimes should have kept him out forever? The intensity showed that wounds from the 1980s had never healed. The Hall of Fame induction ripped them right back open. To understand the defense of Les Boyd, you need to understand the men who argued for him, and you need to understand what they saw that the victims did not see. Number 5 was Mal Meninga, one of the greatest players rugby league has ever produced. Mal was part of the 1982 Invincibles. He played alongside Boyd in a team that many consider the greatest rugby league side ever assembled. When Mal talks about the era, he does not shy away from it. He acknowledges how extreme the toughness had to be. He describes the brutality required just to survive the 1980s. In interviews and honesty sessions about toughness, Boyd's name comes up again and again. Mal respects Boyd because he lived through the same 1982 tour where the Australian forward pack, led by Boyd, physically dismantled Great Britain. That tour earned them the Invincibles nickname, and Mal knows Boyd was the engine that made it all happen. When Mal thinks about the 1982 team, he does not think about the judiciary records. He thinks about dominance. He thinks about legacy. He thinks about a forward pack that changed the international balance of power forever. That dominance matters to understanding number 4, and Wally Lewis is the perfect place to explore what Boyd brought to a team. Wally Lewis is an immortal. Many argue he is the greatest player of all time. He played against Boyd as an enemy. He played with Boyd as a teammate. He experienced both sides of Les Boyd. When Lewis spoke about Boyd, he gave a warning to his teammates: do not take Boyd lightly. He is dangerous. He will hurt you. That is straight honesty. But then something changed. When Boyd moved to Warrington in England, Wally told the players there is something remarkable. He said, by God, you're going to have some fun next year. That shift is crucial. That shift shows how smart Wally Lewis actually was. What Wally understood is that Boyd's presence on a team provided a security blanket for the playmakers. When Boyd was on your side, patrolling the ruck and dominating contact zones, opposition forwards would think twice about targeting your playmakers. They would think twice about going after someone like Wally Lewis. That fear changed how opponents played. That fear created freedom. The brutality that made opponents hate Boyd made his own teammates able to play expansive, beautiful football. Wally was saying to Warrington, you are getting an enforcer who makes your game better. You are getting the fun because Boyd will make sure nobody lays a finger on you without paying a price. Number 3 is Roy Masters. And Roy was not just a defender of Boyd. Roy was the architect who created the environment that produced Boyd. Roy coached Western suburbs in the late 1970s, and he built a mentality called Fibro versus Silvertail, the working class from Western suburbs against affluent players from Manly. Boyd became the physical embodiment of that philosophy. When the Hall of Fame committee was making their decision, Roy spoke directly in Boyd's favor. He told them something important. The Hall of Fame is not a best and fairest award. It is not a clean conduct medal. If it were, Roy argued, the whole room would be empty. Roy brought up Noel Kelly as a precedent. Noel Kelly was sent off 17 times. Noel Kelly was inducted into the Hall of Fame. That precedent mattered. Roy then shifted the conversation from Boyd's suspensions to his actual playing ability. Roy called him a dynamo with remarkable timing and agility. He said Boyd was once considered the best forward in the world. Roy argued that Boyd was a centerpiece of the 1982 Invincibles. When you focus on what Boyd could do with the football, The judiciary record becomes context instead of the whole story. Roy wanted people to see the complete player, not just the suspensions. Number 2 is Greg Alexander, known to everyone as Brandy, and his perspective carries particular fear. Greg Alexander is a Penrith legend and one of rugby league's greatest playmakers. When Greg talks about playing against Boyd, he does not talk about broken bones. He talks about the threat of blindness. Greg said explicitly that Boyd did his best to rip the eyes out of his head. Greg said Boyd tried hard all game to do it. That accusation connects to something much darker. Eye gouging is widely regarded as the ultimate taboo in rugby league. It is worse than breaking a jaw. It is worse than most injuries because the eyes represent something sacred in contact sport. You can recover from a broken bone. You cannot easily recover from blindness. Steve Linnane was another player who gouged eyes, and he got a 20-week suspension. But Linnane is remembered only as a villain. Nobody defends Linnane for the Hall of Fame. The difference with Boyd is that he did other things too. He performed at elite levels. He played in an undefeated tour. He scored tries and made tackles that changed games. Yet when Greg Alexander talks about Boyd, what comes through is lingering horror. This was not just hardness. This was viciousness. This was calculated targeting of the most vulnerable part of the human body. Greg's testimony matters because it shows that the skill argument and violence argument do not live separately. They live together in the same man. Number 1, and this is where the original wound sits, is Darryl Brohman. Darryl is the man whose injury started the entire conversation. In June 1983, Darryl made his origin debut for Queensland at Lang Park. This was the pinnacle of his career. He was a young forward playing for his state, and then Boyd elbowed him in a tackle. The elbow shattered his jaw. Darryl missed the rest of the 1983 season. He lost a year of his prime playing years. More than that, Darryl believes that injury killed his Kangaroos' dreams. He believes it extinguished his career with the Australian national team. The injury was severe enough that Darryl took legal action against Boyd. They settled outside of court, and Boyd paid approximately $30,000 in damages. This is a rare thing in rugby league. Rugby. On-field violence almost never crosses into civil liability, but Brohman's injury did. That settlement stands as a legal acknowledgement that what happened was not just rough play, it was something else. When the Hall of Fame announcement came in 2024, Darryl's response was immediate and raw and brutal. He said he was very disappointed. He said he was very upset. He called it a joke. He posted on social media listing the suspensions like evidence at trial. He pointed out that Boyd got 9 months for breaking his jaw in 1983. He pointed out that Boyd got 12 months for eye gouging Billy Johnston. And then he said, Boyd gets inducted into the Rugby League Hall of Fame. Please, that word says everything. The disbelief, the anger, the sense that justice was being reversed. For Darryl, the induction was not a recognition of skill. It was a validation of violence. It was the sport saying that what happened to him was acceptable. It was worth it. It was worth overlooking because Boyd was also good at football. The 1982 Kangaroo Tour is where the defense of Boyd becomes its strongest. This team is remembered as the greatest rugby league side ever assembled. They went through Great Britain and France undefeated. They earned the nickname the Invincibles. Boyd played in all 3 tests. He played in the front row and the second row. He was responsible for dominating the British pack. The Kangaroos beat Great Britain by a combined score of 99-18 across the series. That margin is not close. That is not a competition. That is a dismantling. Contemporary reports from the tour describe Boyd as an unstoppable force. His ability to offload in traffic combined with his punishing defense made him a complete player. The British press was stunned. The British players were devastated. The Australian team showed the world that the forward pack could dominate in ways Great Britain did not expect. Boyd's performance on that tour is cited by supporters as definitive proof of elite status. He changed the international balance of power. He proved that Australian forwards could outmuscle and outplay anyone. But then came the descent. If 1982 was the peak, the next 2 years were the abyss. In June 1983, Boyd elbowed Darryl Brohman in the jaw. He received a 12-month suspension. That would have been devastating enough. But in late 1984, Boyd eye-gouged Billy Johnstone. He received a 15-month suspension, a record-equaling punishment at the time. The Australian Rugby League effectively declared Boyd unselectable. A 27-month exile followed. The institution that had celebrated him as an invincible now wanted nothing to do with him. This period is critical to understanding why the anti-induction argument carries so much force. How can a player who was banned from Australian Rugby League, forced to move to England just to play, be honored by that same game 40 years later? The answer sits in his redemption overseas. Boyd moved to Warrington in 1985. He arrived as an exile, a man running from his record. What happened next surprised everyone. He was not reviled in England. He was embraced. He played 86 games over 5 seasons. He formed a notorious forward partnership with Kevin Tamati, a New Zealand enforcer, and Mike Gregory, a British hardman. The Warrington Pack became famous for its brutality, but in England, that brutality was celebrated as passion. It was celebrated as commitment. It was celebrated as the physicality that the sport should admire. The culture was different. The context was different. What made you a villain in Australia made you a hero in Warrington. The pinnacle came in 1986. Warrington played in the Premiership final. Boyd was at his best. He scored 2 tries. He played man of the match. Warrington beat Halifax 38-10. Boyd was awarded the Harry Sunderland Trophy, one of the most prestigious individual accolades in British Rugby League history. This moment serves as the cornerstone of the skill argument. It proved that when Boyd focused on playing football, rather than maiming opponents, he could still be one of the best players on the planet. Supporters point to this and say, this is who Boyd really was. This is what he could do. He did not need to break jaws to be great. He could just play the game. Yet that same game proved something else, too. The Warrington story shows that Boyd's violence and Boyd's skill were not separate things at all. They were the same person in different contexts where different people chose to celebrate or condemn him. In Australia, after the suspensions, he was a cautionary tale. In Warrington, he was a folk hero. His legacy became split by geography. In Australia, he is the man who broke Darryl Brohman's jaw. In Warrington, he is the hero who brought steel to the wire pack. The Hall of Fame induction appears to have synthesized both legacies. It accepted the British achievements as a counterweight to the Australian disgrace. The central debate comes down to a single idea. What does the Hall of Fame actually mean? Is it a reward for best conduct and character? Is it a reward for peak performance and dominance? Is it a recognition of historical impact and legacy? Roy Masters argued that it is not a best and fairest award. It is not a clean conduct medal. But critics like Darryl Brohman argue that there has to be a threshold. There has to be a limit. You cannot just ignore that a player deliberately broke another player's jaw. You cannot ignore patterns of violence that ended careers. What makes this debate impossible to solve is that both sides are right. Boyd was undeniably skilled. The 1982 Invincibles tour proved that. His Warrington performance proved that. When Boyd focused on football, he was among the best. But Darryl Brohman's broken jaw was also real. Greg Alexander's fear of blindness was also real. The 12-month suspension was real. The 15-month suspension was real. These are not alternative facts. They are not competing stories. They are all true at the same time. The violence happened. The skill existed. Both are part of the permanent record. The Hall of Fame decision effectively ruled that you can be both. Fame and infamy are not mutually exclusive. You can break a player's jaw and still be a legend. You can be feared as a thug and still be inducted. You can create trauma for your opponents and still be celebrated by supporters. The sport has decided that Les Boyd is all of these things at once, simultaneously great and terrible. For Darryl Brohman and Greg Alexander, the induction is a wound reopened. It is the institution validating the action that cost them. It is the sport saying their pain was acceptable because Boyd could play football at elite level. For Roy Masters, Wally Lewis, and Warrington fans, the induction is justice. It is recognition that Boyd thrived in a brutal environment and shaped International Rugby League. They choose to remember the 1982 Invincible. They choose to remember the enforcer who made teammates better. They choose to emphasize context and era and the reality that the 1980s were fundamentally different from today. The truth is that Les Boyd remains the most polarizing figure in rugby league history because he embodies a fundamental contradiction the sport cannot resolve. He was great and brutal at the same time. He was skilled and violent at the same time. He changed the game and hurt people at the same time. The Hall of Fame did not solve this contradiction. It just decided to honor him anyway. The debate will continue, the old wounds will stay open. And whenever someone asks how good Les Boyd was, the answers will still split the room exactly the way they did in 2024. That is the legacy. That is the paradox. That is why his name still triggers anger and respect in equal measure 4 decades after his peak. If this debate has you thinking about rugby league history and how the sport judges its legends and champions, make sure you like this video and subscribe to see more deep dives into the game's most controversial moments and greatest stories.